Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is the CAD workshop. This is the introduction to SolidWorks, and Brad will be taking us through today. If everybody could please mute themselves and turn off their cameras, we will get started.
Okay, welcome everyone. Let me share my presentation here. This is the introduction to SolidWorks. So this workshop's intended for those that haven't really used SolidWorks before, or maybe you've watched over the shoulder of a fellow teammate. So we're going to kind of take it right from the start. And SolidWorks has really good tutorials. So we're going to kind of work through the tutorial together. But even though it's an excellent tutorial, they jump right into the process. So I think we'll start with a quick little brief introduction to the to CAD and 3D modeling. That'll be a couple minutes at the start, and after that, we can run through the tutorial together. So whether you're doing it live now or watching on YouTube later, the intent is I'm going to have my window shrunk to the full width in half the height. So you'll be able to put your SolidWorks window right above mine. You can push mine right down to the bottom. Sadly, I can't make it go to the bottom from Zoom, so you have to minimize your Zoom window, pull it down, but we'll go through that later. Don't worry if you fall a little bit behind. The presentation will be live on YouTube or on YouTube recorded afterwards. You can go back and watch it later if you fall too far behind. And if my screen is not fully clear because it's small, you'll be running it on your own window as well. So you should be able to see it there. Okay, so solid modeling, it's a really efficient way of like capturing, iterating, and assembling both simple and complex designs. We can build a model, we can take a whole bunch of parts, we can put them together, we can see how they fit and interact. Different people can be working on different parts. Our team does that for a robot. Different groups are working on different sub-assemblies. We put it all into the big robot. We can see all they work together, and if there's anything that's going to collide or interfere. It's really, really useful that way. And one of the really cool things is you can go back at any point in time and change one single dimension. And if your CAD is designed properly, it'll ripple through, propagate through, and all your design changes will go through for any of the parts that are relative, because you can make relative relationships between one. So if you make a bolt bigger by 1 millimeter, all the holes should get bigger by 1 millimeter, and arms, and yeah, you can really control that quite easily. So with any kind of solid modeling program, the kind of flow might be a little different, but the concept is the same. We start with a sketch. A sketch is a 2D flat object, like a pencil line on a piece of paper. There's no volume, there's no height. And the one thing we have to do is we have to make sure it's a closed sketch. So a circle, it's got to start. We scribe around and our start and end match. And when that happens, be it a circle or a whole bunch of individual lines, we get it closed, it turns blue on the inside, and that means we've got a closed solid. So now we can start using that for CAD. And what we want to do that is apply a feature to it. One of the features that we're going to use a lot in solid modeling is an extrude. So what the extrude does, it kind of pulls something off the page or pushes it into the page is a way to think of it. It takes that 2D sketch and turns it into a 3D model. And with SolidWorks, they call it an extruded boss base, which is additive. I don't know why they call it extruded boss base. Most CAD packages just call it a plain extrude, and an extruded cut, which is subtractive. So that's to remove material from something. So if we take that circle that we just sketched and we hit extrude, we get a cylinder. And again, the order is going to change. SolidWorks is going to ask you to say, okay, I want to do an extrude first, and then it'll ask you to do the sketch. Even though we talked about the sketch first, it's kind of arbitrary. You go either way in most packages. So once we click OK on the extrude, you can see it's turned gray, and now that's a part. That's a new part. It's something we can print if we want it. It's got volume. It's got height. It's a tangible solid. We can manufacture it. And another useful feature about this part now, it's got more surfaces. So you can see the cylinder. We've got 3 surfaces. We got one on the top surface, a bottom surface, and then a curved surface around the edge. And those additional surfaces can now be used to sketch on as well. So if we were to take a 6-sided polygon on the top surface, we can just click on that top surface, and that's where a sketch appears. So you can see it's kind of quite clear now that sketch is on the top. It's filled blue, so we know it's a closed feature, or a closed sketch, and we can apply a feature to that. So if we do an extruded cut this time, you can see the little black arrow is pointing down. which means that feature is going down into the part. This will be removing material from it. So we click OK. That kind of hex shape is removed from the cylinder. And we've got a part that hopefully looks like what we want it to do. But another thing is each of those faces now can now become new sketch surfaces. So we can sketch on those faces and start building parts off of that. And that's kind of really the kind of key to solid modeling is you just take a sketch, you run some kind of feature on it. And in a lot of the cases, it will be the extrude feature, but there's some more powerful ones that we'll get into a little bit later. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, and I'm gonna try sharing my SolidWorks. So yeah, I forgot to say at the beginning that you should probably start SolidWorks because sometimes it takes a while to come up. But yeah, start your SolidWorks now. And I'm assuming you can see my SolidWorks window now. And what I've done, I'm gonna kind of shrink it to about half width here. And what you want to do, SolidWorks has got some really good tutorials that kind of walk you through, and it's going to split your screen and kind of guide you on the right while you get to work through on the left. So hopefully everyone's SolidWorks has started by now. And what we do is up near the top right of the screen, there's a question mark and a circle. If we click that, the help menu comes down, and about the third item down is tutorials. And that actually makes my screen very full screen again, so I'll shrink it back down. And you can see my standard SolidWorks window is on the left, and this little tutorial pane is on the right. And what this is going to do is kind of guide us through step by step how to do something. And we can follow along on the right. So the first one we want to run is Introduction to SolidWorks. It says it takes 1 hour. We won't go through the whole thing if we don't have the time, but we'll leave some stuff for you to do at the end as well. And so what happens, it's going to give you a little bit of instructions on the right, instructions on the left. On the very bottom right is the kind of next. It says next topic. It's basically the next step. So along here, it's going to tell you we're going to make this part. We won't worry about the drawings yet, but we'll make this part together. So if we go to my first part, the very first thing it says, we're going to make this part. So just click the new. Let me do something right here first. I've got to turn this off. View, toolbars. I'm going to turn this off because a lot of you might not have this. So it tells you click new and this kind of page on the standard toolbar. But if I look over here, I don't have that icon available. So as with any shortcut key, I could go File, New. But something probably worth touching on, if we say View and Toolbars, there's a whole bunch of different toolbars, and kind of depending on how you use CAD and what you do, you'll pick these toolbars. You can turn them on and off, and you kind of customize it to what you like. So I just clicked on standard, and now you can see this page icon is available here. So when I click on that, if you've not used it, this is your first time using it, it's going to want you to set up your dimensioning. Depending on what we're doing, whether we're doing it with FIRST, which uses imperial or metric, you can kind of change it after the fact. But for this tutorial, I want you to use MMGS, which is millimeter, gram, second, and ANSI for the dimensions. So if you've done that, the next step now is to click you want to make a part. So in SolidWorks, we often make parts which, for example, that cylinder would be a part. If we were going to assemble that cylinder into a robot, if that would say was like a battery or something like that, we would have a robot assembly and we would insert that part into assembly. So we'll cover assembly in a later date, but right now we'll click part and press OK. And one thing it does mention too, you can click this right in the dialog here. It will do the same thing. I don't recommend on doing that though, because this is the tutorial and you kind of want to learn. The whole point of this tutorial is to learn where everything is. So I would not do that, even though it is a quick way of doing it. So we've done that. Next topic is sketching a circle. So as I mentioned, we want to start with a sketch and do a feature, apply a feature to it. And SolidWorks, it wants to tell it, it wants a heads up. So it's going to ask what kind of feature you want to apply. So we're going to do the Extrude boss base first. So it says, oh, yeah, there's one more slide I want to go through. Okay. Yeah, there's a slide. If you look at the slideshow, I'll keep there and I'll kind of just talk about it. This will help you for later if you kind of go through the presentation with the slide deck. Click on the Extrude Boss base. So what the slide talks about is up here. This is our kind of context menu. If we're doing features, we click on this and this top menu will change. So if we're going to sketch, we can click here and all this menu bar up here is context sensitive. So it's going to change things we can do for sketching, like lines, circles, arcs, polylines, all the stuff we want to do for a sketch. If we're doing to features, we click that and it goes to all different features like extrusions, fillets, revolves, things like that. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we get the features tab set. So this extruded boss base will be available. And the way we know which tab to select is because it says it's the features toolbar. So features is selected. Now we can press extruded boss base. So what happens, since we don't have a part to sketch on right now, we don't have a surface to sketch on. Sketches always have to go on some kind of surface or a plane. There's no surfaces on any part yet, so we get to pick one of the default planes. You can see as I move my cursor over, it highlights the different planes. And for this one, it wants us to use the top plane. Let's move over the top plane, we highlight that. And you can see that whole plane kind of swung up and pivoted up to be normal to us. So we're looking straight down on that top plane now. So now it knows that we're going to do a sketch now. So it automatically selected the sketch from the feature toolbar. We don't have to do that. Here's a circle. And you can see these two red lines, that's the origin. And although the origin is kind of arbitrary, the one thing we want to do is fully define our sketches. In order to fully define a sketch, we have to specify every dimension on it, every length of every line, every width, where all the parts are. And it makes it safe, so we can't accidentally click something and drag something around. And also communicates our design intention for anyone who's trying to look at our sketch. In order to do that, the first thing we have to do is we have to lock our first sketch into the origin somewhere. So it kind of makes sense. We've got an origin. Let's make the center of the circle the origin. And with solid modeling, it's something called top-down design, where you don't really care about the size when you first lay stuff down. You kind of put it down, you kind of come back in and start to massage the dimensions and stuff afterwards. So we've placed our circle on the origin, and we don't really care about what the dimension is right now, because we're going to go back and tell it what it is by the smart dimension. So right near our sketch is a smart dimension button. You can see it's kind of two lines with arrows pointing through. That's kind of the universal sign for dimensioning. And once we click smart dimension, as we start moving around, it'll start highlighting on anything we can dimension. So rather than dimensioning from the center out, if we just click the circle, it knows we want to dimension the circle. There's kind of two ways we can dimension from. You'll see, depending on what your angle is, it'll switch between these two modes. The tutorial down here says to use this angled mode here, which is fine. And we picked just an arbitrary size, but now we can come back in. You can see this dialog popped up where we can actually tune exactly what we want. So it said we want 128 millimeters. So we click that and the circle resizes to 128. If you notice before it was blue, now it's turned black. Black lines means that sketch is fully defined. So I could click on this, I could try and drag it around and it wouldn't change. Whereas before I could grab that radius of that circle and make it bigger or smaller. But it's great because it's fully defined now. That's exactly what we want. So now over here, there's often checkbox here for the dimension. We can click that. That dimension is locked in. All right, so the next thing I want to do is do the extrude. We already clicked on extrude, so SolidWorks knows we're going to do that next. We have to exit sketch right now to get out of sketch mode, because right now we're still in the sketch mode. Up here, you can see this button is highlighted, which shows we're in sketch mode. And over to the right here, we have a green kind of yes arrow and an exit and don't save the sketch. So what we want to do is either click exit sketch, or this is kind of saying, yes, we like our sketch. We want to save that sketch. So we click that, it kind of automatically flipped our sketch around into a 3D view, because now we're not on the page anymore, we're in 3D space. So over on the left-hand side here, we got a lot of, a dialog pops up for the boss extrude. And what it says in the property manager under direction 1, select blind and end condition. And basically what blind is, that means we're going to specify how far we want to extrude, how far we want to pull it off the page. There's some other really useful ones in there that we'll get to later. Like for example, if we had a part and we wanted to extrude this up to the face of another part, we could do that as well. But right now, what it says we want to do is blind. We want end condition to be 7 millimeters. And you notice that the dialogues don't really say end condition. If you're not sure, just kind of hover over something. It's something different even. So yeah, so depth. Oh, so yeah. So depth is 7 millimeters. So you can hover over depth, or this will say end condition. Or not. All right, we'll do what it says. Say 7 millimeters, hit enter. And that went from the 10 millimeters down to 7 millimeters. And we can click OK. There. So now that turned gray, which means we have our first part. So we got a part, let's save that part. And I kind of recommend saving quite a bit in SolidWorks. It's a pretty CPU intensive. It sometimes takes takes a lot of CPU, sometimes crashes. So click the save. It wants to type pressure plate. So we can go down here, type, I already have one because I've done this tutorial once or twice. Capital X get turned on somehow. Pressure plate, I'll say 3. Oh, and sorry, below you did see it said SLD PRT. That means we're saving it as a part, not an assembly. You can also make assemblies as well. So just make sure that the part is selected, which it was by default. Okay, so now I talked before about an extrude boss base. So your very first extrude is a base. And then if you pull things off the base, those are called bosses. Just a bit of an industry term right now. So if we go back to the features toolbar, do extruded boss base, what we first have to do is pick somewhere to sketch on, because now the very first thing we're going to do is find a plane to sketch on. So as we start hovering over, you see the yellow line kind of move around. We'll click the top face of that part. You can see our origin now appears on the top face. There's 2 arrows around there. Perfect. We can sketch angled like this if we want, but this time it didn't flip around to be normal for us. So right in the middle of our screen right here is our view orientation. So if we click that down arrow, we can say we want to look at this from the top down. You see the part flips up. So it makes sometimes for some people it makes it a little easier to kind of follow what's going on. Now we want to make a circle, and we want the circle to be somewhere inside this part. So we'll click on the circle, and again, as I'm moving around, you can see I could sketch the circle on and lock it into the perimeter of the circle. I could sketch it out here. I could sketch it on the face of this, but it wants it to go to the origin. So I'm going to click the origin, and I'll make it an arbitrary size because it doesn't really matter. So as you can imagine, the next thing we have to do is dimension it. You can see it's blue right now, and maybe this is what I'll show you right here too. If I grab this, whoops, let me undo that. I still had circle selected. So I hit escape and get out of circle. If I grab that, you can see I can change the size because it's not fully defined. When we add this dimension though, smart dimension, click on the circle, make it angled. The dialog pops up, asking what we want. We want 75 millimeters. You see now it's went black. So if I press escape, smart dimension will unhighlight. Watch this. Press escape. If I try and click on this now, I can't move it because it's fully defined. So we're done our circle. We click OK. Now, for this sketch, we need to make another circle. So we could sketch another circle in the middle and kind of follow it out. Or there's a really useful feature called offset entities. So the offset entities is up here under the sketch dialog. Offset entities over on the right here. What that does, it knows we've got the sketch already that we're already working on, so we can make a sketch so many millimeters bigger or smaller. So under the parameters here, it's right now it's set to 10 millimeters. The tutorial wants us to go to 5. So we'll say 5 millimeters. And you can see right now the yellow one that is the offset entity, it's on the outside, but down here in the example, it actually wants it on the inside. There's a little checkbox down here called reverse. That's went in, it went out, in, out. So yeah, we actually want it to be the reverse on, so it goes inside, and we can click the checkbox. So now we've got these 2 sketches, these two concentric rings right now in one sketch. And SolidWorks kind of knows that if you have two concentric rings like that, you probably want the area between them to be the area of interest. So right now we'll click Exit Sketch. And because we forced it to be the top-down view, it's not giving us a trimetric view. So we don't have the 3D view. So one of the things we can do, we can press our wheel button, kind of start to pan around a little bit, but it takes a little bit of practice to be able to do the wheel button and pan the way you want. We can also go again to this view orientation and click trimetric, which is kind of just tipped down, angled a little bit. And it wants the depth to be 12 millimeters. And as we know from our last extrude, all the things we can do with extrude are over on this pane. And it's one of the simple ones, so there's a lot of more advanced features down here. But right now for the dimension, we want to go to 12. And often I press tab, you'll see it update over here before you hit OK. It looks like it did what I wanted to, so I can hit the checkbox. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is put a hole in the middle. As you can imagine, it's going to start to get a lot easier now. Instead of doing extrude boss base, this time we're going to do an extruded cut. So again, as always, once we are about to do a sketch, we need to select a face. So I'm going to do this front face here. And rather than sketching in the trimetric view, we can click this view orientation, or I can hit spacebar. If I hit spacebar, it brings that view orientation up as well. And click the top. It's a nice little shortcut that's kind of useful. And we want to do a circle. We want it on the origin, and we want it somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we can click circle. You can see now there's a lot more features to pick up on. So it's giving us a lot more context as we do our sketch. So we locked it in the circle. And we can finish the circle by hitting this. And you probably guessed by now, we have to dimension that now to make it fully defined, because it is still blue. We want to make sure it's fully defined and black before we exit. So click here, pull it out. And it's kind of up to you where you put your dimensions. You can always go back and change it later. Try and keep it clean though, just so your sketch is easy to view. So 25 millimeters there. Now we get to make the hole. So once we exit the sketch, it knows we're doing an extruded cut. So let's go back and hit space. Oh, maybe I can't do space quite yet. Let me go to the trimetric view. You can see it's kind of arrow. It knows it's cutting down. And what we could do is we could select a depth down here, just like we have in the past. And by default, yours is probably selected to depth. But instead of doing a depth, we can also select through all. So here, if we had blind selected, it would give us, we can go down 12 millimeters, which is the height of our extrude. But what happens if someone comes back later and changes it to 14? Our cut wouldn't go all the way through. So something you can do with, get to use with your features is you can say, I want to go through all. So now that extrude will cut through everything, regardless if this gets deeper. This went up to 100 millimeters, it would still cut through. And there's also other ways you can do it, and the tutorial will give you other options down here. We won't go into those right now, but if you want to go back into it on your own, feel free to go in. So we hit OK. Oops. What did I do wrong here? Okay, I'm going to exit out. And so, yeah, something happened. I'm not sure. Go into extrude. Okay, so let me sketch 3 right now. Remember I said you can go in either order. So what we'll do instead is I'll go to features. So the sketch is there, but the extruded cut isn't there. So I'll click extruded cut. Set to blind. We'll go through all. Once through all, we don't have to do a depth. So let's try that. There, that's a lot happier. That's a nice thing with solid modeling. If you make a mistake, if you click something somewhere else, you can always kind of make up for it afterwards. So let's talk about one of the other features right now, which is a fillet. So all these features right here, they're very, very sharp. If you were to send this off to machine shop, these can often be razor sharp. And if you're getting the part molded or something like that, often they can't be molded. So one of the things you can do is called a fillet, and the fillet is under your features toolbar, and it's up right here. And with the fillet, you can either select an edge like this or a face like this. It wants to select this top face and this outer edge. So move around until we get the right. And if you see a lot of kind of noise going on, you're having a hard time, move your cursor away where there's less features, and make it a little easier to select which one you want. So we've got these two edges selected. So now and we also have to select our depth. So radius wants to be 2. So again, our menu kind of comes up here. And now say if we did something wrong, if we accidentally clicked this face, if we're a little bit sloppy, you can see we've got face 1, face 2, and face 3 selected here. We don't want this one, that was a mistake. So you always have the ability to go back in here, you say delete. It's not deleting the face that we drew, it's just deleting that fillet on that face. And if I continue to scroll down, here's the radius of the fillet. And we don't want 10, we want it to be nice small, and we want it to be 2. Now, when we hit the check mark, if you notice now, if I zoom in, these are kind of nice curved edges now. So they're not sharp edges. You won't cut yourself, and it's actually a lot more manufacturable and a lot cheaper to manufacture too, if you put a little fillet on everything. Okay. And we're getting close to the end of the workshop here. Try and power through a little bit and save some time for questions. But we've got the cylinder now. There was 6 cylinders around this, I believe. So for that, again, we're going to extrude the boss base. And you can see all of these different places to sketch on now. So it's on this face here we want to sketch on. Now I want us to go to the top view and do a center line. And that's something new we've not done yet. So we go to top view, and from the sketches, here's the line call out. See there's a little arrow down it beside it. We can pull that drop down. And there's something called a center line. A center line is a little different than a line. Did I click center line? I did. Center line is a little different than a line, as it can't be used part of a sketch. It's kind of a little guideline for you. Does it say where it wants it yet? No, it doesn't say where it wants it yet. Oh, no, I'm not scrolling. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So center line's not used as part of the sketch. It's just kind of a little guideline for you. So I want us to draw a center line from the origin to somewhere in the middle here. So let's do that. From the origin, somewhere in the middle. Now, as I start sketching around, you can see as it starts highlighting in orange, it's locking to different places. And I can also go out and see how it's got the little bar, the horizontal bar. If I go up here, it's got a little vertical bar, which basically says, I want to lock him to be vertical. So we'll click that. And it wants to keep sketching. You could sketch like a whole bunch of stuff around. So I'm gonna hit escape to get out of the sketch mode. And now that line is locked. So if I hit escape, so if I try and move this now, I can move it up and down, but I can't move it left or right, no matter how hard I try, because it's saying that this thing is locked vertical. So it's got to stay vertical. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Oh, I don't think I dimensioned it yet. Oh, it doesn't want to be dimensioned yet. Okay. So it's got a nice endpoint now. So one of the things you can do when you have endpoints, you can match other sketches of those endpoints. So let's take a circle. We'll click on here. We'll make it however big we want, because we're going to come back and change it. And hit OK, because we've got a circle. So now we want to dimension the circle. And we want to make the circle 27 millimeters. And we also want to make this center line 35 millimeters. Easy enough. Once we have select the smart dimension, it's going to stay in that mode. So we can do those two really quick. So this one we want to be 27. And this, you can see it, this doesn't quite look like the sketch yet. That's because we have to dimension the center line. So instead of going from this point to the origin and dimensioning that, we can just click the center line, pull that out, and say 35. Now this looks an awful lot like that. If your circle doesn't line up with this this boss feature in here, it's probably because you didn't reverse direction on the boss. That's a common mistake that people make. So you just go back into your feature tree and change that. So now let's extrude that. So we'll exit the sketch. I think it wants the depth to be 30. Let's go to trimetric again. I like to see it extrude. Feel free to do that anytime. You see right now, it's got this little bit here. You see now when I hit, did I say 30? Yeah, when I hit 30 and tab, it kind of pops up. You kind of see that happening in real time. Good. I want us to do trimetric anyways, so we'll hit yes on that. Now, you can see the parts are starting to merge in with each other, right? They're all starting to be the same. They're not individual parts. Because we're working on one part right now, they're all joined together. So there is a hole on the top. So as we know by now, we can do an extruded cut. We need to pick a surface, so we'll pick this top surface. And instead of going to the top-down view, we can do it right here. So if we do a circle, it's going to be sometimes a little harder to lock into the origin. So often what you can do is if you hover over something, Solidworks is good about knowing about if you hover over a feature, it knows you're interested in it. So now, see how even though I moved away from the edge of that circle, I've got these features. Now I know I can lock into that dimension, that origin of the circle, and make a circle that's locked, like coincident with the center of that circle. So the two will be concentric. So I go, okay. Now I have to dimension it. It wants the dimension to be 15. Smart dimension. Ooh, we were almost 15. Look at that. We're that good. 15 millimeters. And hit OK. And let's make the hole by exiting the sketch. So now, if we zoom out a little bit, this is the same kind of issue we had before, where we can do a depth, but if that ever changes, it knows it's 30 millimeters, it wouldn't go all the way through. So again, in our end condition, we can say through all. There's a bunch of different end conditions, like through all both. If it's one, if you want to cut up and down, you go up to the next surface, you go up to a vertex, up to a different surface. And some of those will have different options that you have to select. But for now, we can get by with through all. Okay. So now we can add fillets to the top, to a bunch of the features. Now, because a lot of the stuff is hidden now, one of the other features we can do is the display style. So right now, if we open this up, it's selected to shaded with edges. If we go just shaded, you can see all those black edges around here disappeared. But what we can also do is just one with little dots. In CAD, if a line is hidden, you kind of represent that with a dotted line. So you can see there's all these dotted lines in here. So that allows us to select surfaces that are inside our sketch that we would normally be able to see. So it wants us to select the top surface, one of these edges from the fillet, and the bottom surface. So I clicked fillet. I click the top surface here. We'll make sure they're both highlighted. That both turn blue. It wanted one of these edges. So I'll zoom in a little bit so I can do it. I click that. Now, if you notice, I clicked blue, but it went yellow all the way around because over here in the dialog, it's got something called tangent propagation. So anything connected to that line, anything tangent to it, it'll propagate that feature along. So instead of having to click all those edges, I clicked the one and it propagated all the way around. Very useful. I click that one and boom, yellow turned all the way around and also wants its hidden line at the bottom. And it told us our depth somewhere. It's already set to 2. So SolidWorks usually remembers your last depth. And so it was 2. So we hit OK now. You can see the fillets kind of appeared in here. We can go back to our shaded with edges view. You can see these nice round fillets now. Also makes the part stronger, makes it easier to manufacture as well. Okay, this might be a good place to stop and leave this for your homework. What we have now, we've got this one feature made, and The next feature is a circular pattern. I'll give you one hint though. You can see here in our, this is the slide that I didn't talk about. In our feature tree, we can go back and look at any of these sketches. So say, for example, I wanted to go back to our very first feature we did. If I go to the top of the feature tree, this is kind of like the menu for our part. This is the very first sketch we drew. This is the very first extrude we did, sketch we drew. I click on that. I click on the dimension. I can make this 200. That circle got really big. Let's close that. We'll exit the sketch. You see now our part changed. So we can get back and edit features that way. But in the help, it's going to tell you to do that. But this feature tree is going to be covered by the linear pattern dialog. And what it's going to want you to do is a circular pattern. So instead of linear pattern, we're going to click down here. We'll go to circular pattern. You can see our feature tree was just hidden. The way you can get around that is this is kind of like the in context feature tree. So I click down. That's your little hint. And this is our list of features. So we can go back and select what it wants. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to stop sharing that screen. We will go back to the slide presentation and do present mode. Yeah, I got ahead of myself. So these are the couple of slides talking about the workspace, but we already covered that. And we talked about the workspace. We talked about the feature tree, the design tabs, context sensitive tools, and then the tutorial. So if you didn't catch all of this, you can go back and see it on our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Here's a link to it. If we get up to 100 subscribers, I think it gives the creators a little more flexibility on the stuff they can do. I've got the space for questions now. And in case you missed about the feature pattern, this is something that catches a lot of people up. So I just added 2 extra slides at the end for a hint. So do we have any questions for anyone?
Don't see any questions. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the live stream and then we can have this another conversation off, like off of the live stream. So thank you very much, Brad. Appreciate it.